I'm really skeptical about bringing this today just because of the email last night.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if it's the best idea, so I'm going to park somewhere close to campus so I can, or close to class so I can just like walk there quickly. Don't get too many weird looks. And of course, as I'm walking here, there's a cop parked at the stop sign and the dog, the K9 in the bark backing, and I'm just like, oh God, please don't turn left. But yeah, no, it's fine.
Yeah.
Let me just make sure this mouse is going to work. Yeah.
Okay.
Alright. Alright. So I'm sure all of you already know from my family tradition speech and just from hearing me throughout this class, I'm a huge baseball fan. I played it for 18 years or more, and throughout my 18 years of playing baseball, not a lot has changed. I mean, most sports don't change too often. Their traditions are set in their ways. But with baseball, the one thing that has changed over the course of the years is baseball bats. With new technology, baseball bats are constantly changing. But with change, there comes a safety factor as well. Because as the technology increases, you want to make sure that the batter doesn't get an edge on the pitcher and an unfair advantage, and the biggest issue is safety. So, today I want to talk about modern baseball bats and the evolution of roughly the past 50 years, going back to roughly 1970. And I want to cover basically wooden bats, aluminum bats, composite bats, and then with composite bats, the different rating systems that came along to help make sure players were safe. So, going back to 1970, wooden bats were around for almost over 100 years. And the origin of the modern baseball bat started with a wooden bat. And it goes, like I said, it goes back to the late 1800s. And with that, for over almost 100 years, there really posed no threat to players on defense or offense with wooden baseball bats. The biggest issue was bat splintering and breaking, which if any of you guys have watched Major League Baseball, it will happen. Bats will break. Sometimes they just fall right there in the batter's box. Sometimes they fly as far as shortstop or third base. So when they splinter, that becomes an issue. And back in the 1970s and the early 1900s, they want to limit the amount of baseball bats they're going through because it obviously costs the team's money. And for major league players, it's not as big of a deal. But when it comes to little leaguers, high schoolers, and all that, where their funds aren't that much, you want to limit the amount that you're breaking baseball bats. So in 1970, aluminum bats were introduced. And with that came a whole new spectrum of issues that they didn't even know they were going to face. And so with the introduction of aluminum bats, came the issue of, well, there's the weight, and we've got to make sure performance meets that of wooden bats. So with metal bats, what it allowed them to do is hollow them out to basically counteract the weight, so that way you don't have, because a solid aluminum bat would have too much weight on the front end, and it'd be way too heavy to swing compared to a wooden bat. Even though a wooden bat is solid, it's much lighter. But the thing with aluminum bats is that it really hurts your hands when you hit them. I don't know if any of you guys have any of you ever swung a complete aluminum bat? And if you don't hit it on the exact sweet spot, which usually is only about that long on the barrel of the bat, it really, really stings your hands and it hurts. So, but with that, at the time, there was also no rating because it was new technology that they had never dealt with before. Because you can't really rate a wooden bat besides just the species it's made out of. So before aluminum bats, they would just go through different species to see which one worked the best. In this case, this one's maple. So maple, oak, ash was a common one back in the day, but they found it broke too much. And so with aluminum bats, they didn't have that rating issue when it first came about. And this led to more issues, which I'll talk about further down the line. But with the hollowing of the tube, came another factor that they didn't realize until further down the line, which was what a lot of you guys probably know as pop, right? You've heard about baseball bats having pop. Well, what that really is actually what's called a trampoline effect. And there's an there's an article from 2001 that from the performance assessment of wood, metal, and composite bats that goes on to talk about the trampoline effect of baseball bats. And what that is the rate at which the metal bat, because it's hollow and it has a thin metal wall, compresses on impact and then returns the ball. And it's basically like jumping on a trampoline. And so I'm sure all of you guys have seen that. And the higher you jump, meaning the more velocity you have, the more spring you're going to have. And so with that being said, when composite bats came around and were introduced in roughly around 2000, many people started to realize that players were getting hurt because the ball was leaving the bat way too quickly. So a pitch coming in at 100 miles an hour should roughly leave around, with the batter's force behind it, should roughly leave roughly around 100 to 105. It shouldn't leave too much faster than it's coming in. But it was leaving the bat at a 100-mile-an-hour fastball at roughly 120 or 130, and sometimes even pushing 140 miles an hour. And so a baseball leaving that fast, going straight back at the pitcher who's only 60 feet away, the reaction time is almost instantaneous. And if you can't get your glove up or your hand in the way, it's a life-threatening injury if they get hit in the head. So on top of that, the composite bats also brought the factor of reinforced carbon fiber polymer. So in this case, this is a composite bat. So this portion of the bat is completely solid wood. It's just maple. The handle from roughly like this white portion down is going to be that carbon fiber polymer. And what that helps do, and I mean, as you can see in the pictures, this wood bat is a composite bat that's very similar to mine, except for mine's a newer one, so I'll go on to tell you about the rating. But there's metal bats as well that are composite, but all metal. And what that means is that it's just made of a bunch of different materials. It could be all aluminum, or it could be a mixture of different types of materials, and that's why it's considered a composite bat. And so these composite bats brought a lot of advantages, being durability, weight distribution, and increased trampoline effect, as I was saying, but it also brought about a higher dampening effect. So when I was talking about the aluminum bats, you don't get that sting. It doesn't hurt nearly as often. You don't have to hit it in a sweet spot to guarantee that it's not going to hurt your hands. So with these composite bats also came what's known as the Besser rating. How many of you have heard of Besser rating before when it comes to baseball bats, if you guys played baseball? Okay, so Besser stands for ball exit speed ratio. And that's just the ratio at which, in terms of simple physics, the ball impacts the bat and returns at a certain velocity. And they're supposed to be able to calculate, based on the type of pitch and how fast it's coming in, what the ball's going to return at. And a lot of these composite bats in the early 2000s had a Besser rating that was way too high for the acceptable range. And again, kids were getting hurt. Pitchers would get hit in the head and get sent into comas. Kids at anywhere in middle infield would also get hit, and it wasn't just because they didn't have the reaction time, but the ball was traveling so fast, even when they went to go catch it, it would break their mitt and still hit them, and that would cause some kind of damage. So with that being said, a new standard needed to be set. And so with that new standard came the BB-Core era. Now, this bat, like I said in the previous slide, is very similar to the composite bat that you saw. But this one's BB-Core certified. So as you can see right here, there's a BB-Core certified marker. Every bat, including mine, has a BB-Core certified mark on it. If it doesn't, you can't use it in Little League, high school, Babe Ruth, Pop Warner, or even college. College still has to use metal bats. or composite wooden bats, and it has to be BBCOR certified. And what BBCOR stands for is batted ball or bat ball coefficient of restitution. Now, there's a bunch of math behind it that I could barely understand, even as an engineer. And it's, but what it's saying is that the rate at which the ball leaves the bat has to be about 0.5 the ratio of what they were expecting. And so this helped reduce the amount of injuries that players were receiving. And so there was a article published, an experimental investigation of the effect of the use of performance of composite baseball bats in 2009 that stated governing bodies have come to depend on comprehensive lab test methods to measure the batted ball performance of these non-wood bats and use these test methods to help on setting a performance limit. And so that's where BBCOR came from. And to this day, BBCOR is the standard for any high school, college, Babe Ruth, Little League, anyone that uses a metal bat, minus the Major League because they hit the ball too hard and that'd be really, really dangerous. But to this day, BBCOR is still the one that's being used. And going into the future, bats are going to continue to get improved upon. And as they improve the technology, new ratings will have to come out. But for the time being, BBCOR is their best option. And I hope that this speech, even though a lot of you don't play baseball or probably never will again, somewhere down the line your kids may play. And so this may be information that may affect them, and hopefully it helps you.